Good afternoon, everyone. It's Mr Hegarty here, and thanks so much for joining today, Monday, on our 2 o'clock session. It's really good to speak to you. You know what? It's kind of weird. On Friday, I got to lie in a little bit, so I didn't have to get up early and practice the questions early. But I kind of missed the session. At 2 o'clock, I was like, I kind of wanted to keep doing our session, even though it was bank holiday. So I'm really glad to be back. It's really good to see so many of you here, and a massive big up to you guys today, and we're going to do some tricky maths. Now, if you remember last time, do you remember I told you I did an extra lesson because I wanted to show you how to reverse and go backwards from some of the manipulating powers we did before. So this was actually going to be lesson 4, what we're doing today. It's all exam standard questions, okay? So I wanted to finish this section off, just us going through 5 or 6 questions I've seen in the exam. Bear in mind, it's in the AS, and it's only a couple of marks, these ones. They're not a lot of marks, but I wanted to just make sure that we just cover those off so we feel all happy before we go to our next topic. All right? Lovely stuff, peoples. Now, just before I get going, remember, as always, your brain and your attention. You can do it. Be positive. You guys are awesome and ace. And I know you guys are able to cope with what I'm going to do today. And remember to write stuff down. The big thing that Mr. Hegarty's banging on about all the time, I'm always going to bang on about it, is write the workings down, show your methods, do the my turn with me, and then do the your turn afterwards. Okay, just before we get going, I want to just highlight something that's really important that you guys need to know, all right? Now, I think you guys know this, but I just want to say it because I'm going to use it over and over in this lesson, all right? So, imagine I said to you, what is 2/3 to the -1, to the power of -1? Well, you guys should know that means 1 over 2/3, which is 1 divided by 2/3, which is dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. It's like 1 multiplied by 3 over 2, which is just 3 over 2. So 2/3 to the power of -1 is actually 3 over 2. It flips the fraction in effect. So I just want to generalize that. If you had any fraction like, let's say, m over n to the -1, tell me off the top of your head what that would be without having to show all the working. What would m over n to all to the -1 be? And type it in the chat there. Yeah, loads of you said that's n over m. Absolutely fantastic. We're going to use that a lot today. And one other one we're going to use, just to be really clear, sometimes we see 1 over n. The m number is 1. So 1 over n to the -1 is n over 1, right? But n divided by 1 is just n, all right? So that's the other rule we're going to use a fair bit today. Just wanted to make sure, in case, I can't remember if I've explicitly told you guys that before, but I just wanted to make sure we know it because we're going to need it a lot today. All right? Okay, let's crack on. Every question I found was on an AS paper today. Some are harder than others, but let's just get through, feel confident about our lives because we've actually done some AS material. Here we go. First question of the day. Probably is a bit of a bad boy. If p is equal to 1 over 25q squared, write an expression of p to the power of a half in terms of q. So, we want to work out what p to the half is. Now, we are told in the question that p is equal to 1 over 25q squared. So we're going to, instead of p, write 1 over 25q squared, and that's to the half. So I've done nothing but use the question so far, all right? And remember from this rule, when we've got a number multiplied in our power to the power rule, we have to take that number out to the power. So what we're going to say, break that up into 1 over 25 to the half and q squared to the half. That's just breaking that out. Now, 1 over 25 to the half. Remember, a half means the square root of. So this is just the square root of 1 over 25. And we're multiplying it by q squared to the half, power of the power. That's q to the 2 times a half. Now, tidying this up, hopefully you guys know the square root of 1 over 25 is a fifth. Why? Because a fifth times a fifth gives you 1 over 25. So this thing here just simplifies to a fifth. And q to the 2 times a half is 1. So we just get multiplied by q, a fifth q. So p to the half is the same thing as a fifth q. Or you could even write that, it's fine to write that as q over 5. Both of those would be an acceptable answer. Okay. So that was a exam standard question. Bit tricky. You've got to remember power half is a square root. You've got to break up the number and the powers, and then you've got to do the power of the power rule a few times, and you've got to make sure you write your answer nice and neatly at the end. All right, here we go. Over to you, and see if you can do this one on your own. First question for you today. Some lovely answers. Ethan, Suman, Lois, Emily, Jack, Isabella, Daniel, Amit. Sorry I can't say everyone's names. Finn, Branwen, Luke. Lovely stuff. A lot of you are getting a third Q or a Q over 3. Let's have a look to see what I got this morning. I got a third Q, and this morning I forgot to write the equivalent of that is actually Q over 3, just like you guys were saying. So absolutely spot on. Just something to note in the chat there. Now, this isn't your fault. This is a chat issue. Some of you in the chat are writing 1 over 3 Q. That when you write it like that, that actually means 1 over 3q, like that, which isn't the answer. It's q over 3. If you want to write it in fraction form, the way you need to do it is just with brackets in the chat. You'd have to write 1 over 3q like that, like some of you have written. Now, in the exam or on paper, I'm sure you guys have written it properly. Please don't worry. I'm just saying that in case it was an issue, but I know that's a chat thing. We can't write our maths neatly on the chat, so no stress out over that. I know what you guys meant. You meant 1 over 3 multiplied by q, or just q over 3. What a good start today. Let's try the next one. The next one now, again, it's pretty tricky. Here we go. If p is equal to 1 over 25q squared, write an expression for 3p to the negative 1 in terms of q. So 3p to the negative 1. Now, just before we get going, I really need to point out to you that this means 3 times p to the negative 1. Okay? So the 3 is separate. The 3 is not being raised to the negative 1. If the 3 was also being, it would have to be in brackets like this. And that would mean the 3 and the p are to the negative 1. It's not. It's 3 times p to the negative 1. Now, in the question, you're given p. So happy days. Just keep that bad boy 3 there as it is. Don't stress out too much over that. And keep that 3 as it is. And then replace p by this thing here. 1 over 25 q squared. And don't forget that negative 1. Keep that 3 there, remember that. Then we can break out this. We've got a number component and we've got an algebraic component, so we can raise each to the negative 1. So multiplied by 1 over 25 to the negative 1 and multiplied by q squared, also to the negative 1. Now, that's a 3. Remember what I said at the start, 1 over 25 to the negative 1 just gives you 25, right? We talked about that right at the start over here when I brought those rules out for you. That's why I mentioned them. So 1 over 25 to the negative 1 is just 25. So replace that by 25. And q squared to the negative 1, well, that's q to the 2 times negative 1, which is going to be q to the negative 2. So tidying these bad boys up, 3 multiplied by 25 is 75. So replace that. And we've got q to the 2 times negative 1, which is q to the negative 2. And therefore, that there is our answer. The other way of writing that is keep the 75 on top. Q squared means over, q to the negative 2 means over q squared. So we could write that as 75 over q squared as well. Both of those are absolutely acceptable. A few people are struggling in the chat there. Remember that everything we've done today is built on the 12 lessons prior. So today's the 13th lesson. We've built up really, really slowly to make sure we can get to this point. And you can always go and rewatch those videos. Mr. Arnold will post the playlist in the channel if anyone's struggling. Don't beat yourself up. Don't feel stressed. Sometimes it takes longer to understand. And don't worry if other people get it before you. Okay, your turn. Tricky one. Let's see if you guys can do this. Loads of good answers coming in. Don't worry, Luke. It's tricky today. Go and watch the previous 13 lessons. You can do it. It's just those ones were crucial to build us up to exams that we're doing today. So loads of people are getting 36 over q squared, right? Or 36q to the negative 2. Let's remind me what I got this morning and see if it was the same as you guys. Happy days. I'm really happy about that. Yes, when I did this one, I got 36q to the negative 2, or you could write that as 36 over q squared. Really well done, people. Excellent, excellent work. Okay, one more a bit like this, right? And it's even a little bit harder. And then we're going to then finish off with, I think, 3 more exam style questions that are a slightly different mold. All right. So next one. If P again is 1 over 25q squared, write an expression for P squared Q. So we're trying to work out here, in terms of Q, by the way, you want Q in your final answer, right? And we want to work out P squared Q. So P squared Q. Well, P is given in the question. So I'm going to replace the P here, 1 over 25 Q squared, all squared, right? So all I've done there is I've used this knowledge here to slip that in for P instead of having P written there. And then just keep that Q there as well, because it's fine to leave it there. We were asked for the answer in terms of Q. Now what we can do is we can bring the power into the number and here. So we can say that's 1 over 25 squared times Q squared squared. And then don't forget that times by Q, that's still here. Now 1 over 25 times 1 over 25, 25 times 25 is 625. So this would be 1 over 625. That's me replacing this with just that. Then what we've got next is we've got ourselves q squared all squared. So that would be times q to the 2 times 2. And then we've got ourselves this rogue q as well. So we've still got ourselves this rogue q that we keep in here. So keep the 1 over 625 as follows. Happy days. Q to the 2 times 2 is q to the 4. And times that q is really q to the 1. So when you've got the same base, you can add the powers. So that's going to be q to the 4 plus 1, which is q to the 5. So to summarize, this is 1 over 625 q to the power of 5. Or another way of writing it, you could have that q to the 5 on top and have the 625 on the bottom. Both of those are totally acceptable for our answer for p squared q in this particular case. Eva, these are tricky today. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They take a bit of practice. After the session, you can rewatch this. You can redo the my turn and your turn. I know you guys can do it because I've seen in the past we've done some tricky bad boys and you guys have gone away and fixed it up afterwards. We are doing some really, really tricky ones here. Okay. Time for you guys to see if you can do one. True bad boy for you today. Here we go. See if you can do that on your own. Some people finding this okay. Some people getting some really quick answers here. Some people wondering the level. This is probably at the very highest end of GCSE, but at the very start of AS level as well. You probably wouldn't see a question like this at GCSE. Probably not. Probably a bit too hard, but it's also right just at the start of the course of AS. It isn't like genuine A level like you do in year 13. This is the basics you need in your head. So a question like this might be like 1 or 2 marks at the start of an AS paper. Okay, so let's have a look what I got. Loads of you got 1 over 81 multiplied by q to the power of 5 or q to the power of 5 over 81. Wow, that's exactly what I got as well. That is exactly what I got as well. That was a really good attempt from a lot of you guys. Luke, don't worry. Remember what I always said many times in maths, in particular at university. I didn't understand a word the teacher was saying. I went away. I rewatched it. I reread my notes. I got books. I practiced questions. And eventually I could do it. It just takes a bit longer sometimes. And other times you'd be doing something that goes straight in your head. That's the way the brain works. That's what makes us individuals. We just need a little different time from each other. There's no one size fits all rule that you have to learn it first up. So if you're struggling, Luke, the first thing I'd say is really proud of you for admitting that and go away and rewatch these. I know you can do it. You've been here many of the sessions. You can definitely do it. Okay, let's have a go at some different ones today. These ones are a slightly different style. The good news is this next one's probably the easiest question of the day in the middle, but they ramp up, and the last question we're going to do is going to be proper tricky. So, here's our next question. We are told, and this exam standard, it came up in the exam AS, given that y is equal to 5 to the power of x, express 5 to the power of 4x in terms of y. So they want us to write 5 to the power of 4x with y's in it. Well, hopefully you know from what we did on Thursday when we break this up, we can write that as 5 to the power of x to the power of 4. And in the question, we're told that 5 to the power of x is just y. So this thing here is just y to the 4, or you don't really write it with brackets, you just write y to the power of 4. So 5 to the power of 4x is y to the power of 4. So I put that one in there just to warm us up. I did see it in an AS question. I actually did see it, so I'm not lying about that. I did see it. It was only 1 mark, but I wanted to just make sure we break up the session because I knew the last one we did was difficult, and the last one today we're going to do is pretty difficult. Okay, here we go. Your turn. Should be okay for you based on what we've done so far today. See if you can answer this one. We've got a Knight of the Realm on, Sir Peter, Daisy, Mariam, Ashkaran, Abby, Rory, Asmol, Nameless, Edward, Lois, Lizzie, Lauren, Lashman, Ethan. Loads of you guys are getting y to the power of 3. That looks promising. Are you right? Yes, that's what I got this morning. Y to the power of 3, y cubed. Lovely stuff. Okay, let's try the next one. The next one is fairly tricky. So the next one here, given that y is equal to 3 to the power of x, express 3 to the power of 4x take away 2. So let's start with 3 to the power of 4x take away 2. And all we've got to do, our step 1, is to break this up. So I'm going to write that as 3 to the power of 4x multiplied by 3 to the power of negative 2. We did that a lot on Thursday. We broke up things like this into this format. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this up into 3 to the power of x to the power of 4. And I'm going to keep this thing here, 3 to the negative 2. I'm going to write that as 1 over 3 squared, what its meaning is, so I can actually work out a number answer for it. Now, the reason I did this bit here is because I was told in the question that 3 to the power of x was equal to y. So I can just substitute in y here. So this is y to the power of 4 multiplied by 1 over 3 squared, which is 1 over 9. Oh, not 1 over q, multiplied by 1 over 9. Oh yeah, I've done it twice. I can't help myself from writing a q. Maybe it's all the q's we wrote earlier today. That should be 1 over 9. And just to tidy that up, we can write that as a ninth y to the power of 4 or y to the 4 over 9. Absolutely, both of those are completely acceptable. Whichever one you want to write it as is allowed, and we're done. So y to the power of 4 over 9, or a ninth y to the power of 4. Right, your turn. Here we go. Give that one a go. Okay, some really good answers in there. A lot of you are writing y to the power of 5 over 64, or a 64th multiplied by y to the power of 5. Let's see what I got. I actually got the same this morning. I got the exact same as you guys. A lot of you guys are getting in the chat. It's a really good effort. Remember, if you're having a bit of difficulty with these, I know you can do it. You just might need a little bit more time. Remember me, right? I did maths all the way through school. I did A-level maths and further maths. I did university maths. I taught maths. So some of this is second nature to me, and occasionally I make a mistake. Absolutely don't stress out. But if you are struggling, put in the hard work. Hard work is always the solution, a way out of a bit of trouble, way out of not understanding. The rule there for you in the YouTube playlist, Mr. Arnold will post. I know you guys can do it if you keep trying. Okay, 2 more questions today. 2 more questions for us to do today. Both of them are fairly tricky. So let's do this one here. Given that y is equal to 5 to the power of x, express 1 over 5 to the power of x take away 3. Oh, okay. So 1 over 5 to the power of x take away 3. Now, hopefully you know something like this. 1 over x to the power of a, you can write that as x to the negative a, right? That's just a rule, one of our early rules over here. One of these rules, where's the negative ones? One of these rules here, this rule here, okay? So we can do that. So therefore, here, I've got 1 over 5 to the power of x take away 3. I can just write that as 5 to the power of negative x take away 3. Right? I could write it like that. Or, maybe a bit easier way to describe it, because I've got 1 over something, I could write it to 5 to the x take away 3 all to the negative 1, like that. I could write it in that way. Now, what we can do then, let's just consider this bit here on its own. So let's break that up into 5 to the power of x multiplied by 5 to the power of negative 3. And that's all to the negative 1. So I've broken that up, just breaking up these as I've done in Thursday's lesson. We did a lot of that. And now what I can do is I can bring this negative power into both these terms here. But before I do that, the question told me y was 5 to the power of x. So I can replace this bad boy with y. So what have I got for myself here? Well, I've got y times 5 to the negative 3, which is 1 over 5 cubed. I'm going to keep that negative 1 there. And I'm just going to evaluate this. 1 over 5 cubed is 1 over 125. So this is y times 1 over 125 to the negative 1. So what we can do is make the y to the negative 1 and make the 1 over 25 to the negative 1. So we can write this as y to the power of negative 1 multiplied by 1 over 125 to the negative 1. Now, hopefully you'll remember what we did earlier. Remember when I've got 1 over a number to the negative 1, I can just flip it and I get 125. And y to the negative 1 is just 1 over y. So that's 1 over y multiplied by 125. And you tidy that up as 125 over y. Or another way of writing it is 125 y to the negative 1. So you can see how complicated these can get with your negatives, with your power of the power, with your, flipping fractions, with all sorts of stuff going on here. These can get tricky. You've got to have all your basics. That's why I did 4 lessons last week on this stuff, really to give us the confidence to build it up, to hopefully we can put it all back together. And Jay, I prefer 1 over 25. I prefer 125 over y as well, actually. I think I much prefer that way of writing it. So total shout out to you and agree with that. Okay, guys, your turn. Here we go. Seriously, you guys get the answers quicker than I even do. I do show all my working that. I hope you guys are actually showing all your working. That's much more important than just getting the answer. But seriously, some good stuff there. Okay, let's see what I got this morning when I did it. I got 16 over y, like so many of you are getting. Or you could write that as 16y to the power of negative 1. I kind of like 16 over y the best. Definitely like that the best. I hope you guys are all showing your working. It's really important that you're showing your methods, that in case you make a mistake in the exam, you get method marks, but also it's just good practice to show your working. You will lose marks if you don't show your working at A level. It's a fact, and Mr. Arnold has written that in the chat as well. Okay, last question of the day. We are on our 30 minutes, but I've got to show you this. Okay, I've got to show you this one. Brace yourselves. It's a genuine bad boy. I don't know if it's the hardest question we've ever done. You've got to have your wits about you. I don't want to skip it because I don't want to leave you guys on your own on this one. So let me show you one, give you a go, and you're going to be in great position. We're going to do a new topic starting from tomorrow anyway. So just want to make sure that we've done a genuine bad boy. We absolutely have tried a difficult question. Here it is. Ooh, this one's tricky. Tricky customer. Okay, y equals 2 to the power of x. We're told that. We're asked to express 64 over 8 to the power of 2 take away 3x in terms of y. Whew. Okay, breathe, people, breathe. When I see a difficult question like this, I breathe before I panic. So what's going on in my mind with this? I'm thinking the question is asking me to write in terms of y, and y has got powers of 2 in it. So I'm thinking in my head, I'm going to write this bad boy everywhere where I can in powers of 2. That might be a good start. I might be able to get there, or maybe I just break out the bottom, which needs breaking out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this as, actually, I'm going to just show you 2 ways of doing it. I didn't do it like this morning, I don't think, but I'll just show you this way here. So 64 over 8 to the power of 2 take away 3x. So leave the 64 where it is, over, break the bottom out, the denominator. So that's 8 squared multiplied by 8 to the negative 3x. And tidying this up, this is 64 over 8 squared is 64. And this bad boy, just leave it where it is just for now. We're going to come back to it and deal with it. The reason I did that is that 64 and that 64 cancels. Those two 64s cancel each other out. And we really get 1 over 8 to the power of negative 3x. Okay, which is 8 to the power of negative 3x to the negative 1, because it's 1 over that. So I can write that as what was on the bottom to the power of negative 1, which simplifies to 8 to the power of negative 3x times negative 1 is positive 3x. Now, you might go, well, how's that helping us, sir? It's not. Y was 2 to the power of x. Yes. Let's now convert this 8 into a power of 2. 8 can be written as 2 cubed. Right? So replace that 8 bad boy with 2 cubed instead. But do not forget, whatever you do, you've still got your 3x there. And what do you have at the end? Well, this here is, if you do to the power of the power, 2 to the power of 3 to the 3x is 2 to the power of 3 times 3x, which is 2 to the power of 9x, which you can write as 2 to the x all to the power of 9, breaking out that multiplication there, which hopefully you can see. I might write over here because it goes off the end of the page. We were told in the question y equals 2 to the power of x, so we can replace this bad boy with y, and we would get the answer y to the power of 9. So just to summarize, this 64 over 8 squared take away 3, 8 to the power of 2 take away 3x, it can simplify to y to the power of 9, and that is our final answer. That probably truly is a bad boy. Capiche, someone said. Time for you guys to have a go yourself. Here you go. See if you guys can do that. Okay, a lot of you guys got an answer. Y to the power of 6 or Y6. I actually did it a slightly different way than I showed you here, but you should get the same answer. It was Y to the power of 6. If you followed my method here, you would have also got Y to the power of 6. Wow, I need a lie down. Actually, I don't need a lie down. I've got loads of work to do today. So lie downs are not happening, but that was really tough. Make sure Mr. Arnold will post the playlist link, and he will also post the set of slides for today with all blank versions and all the written answers. I suggest you go over these ones. They're tricky as anything. Go over these and then make sure I've given you extra questions for you to practice on, just like the ones we did today with the answers, so you know if you got them right or wrong. Really tricky stuff. Now, I also like to say before you go, remember to come here if you want to learn. Like, we want niceness in the chat. We want you guys being positive. We want that nice environment we've had all this time. Let's be, let's make sure we maintain that. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you and share it with as many friends as you've got. Last thing I'd say is if you've got any brothers or sisters, okay, that are in year 6 and going to year 7, Hegarty Maths and Sparks have actually built a brand new platform to help get them ready for year 7 in primary, from moving from primary to secondary. Mr. Arnold will post the link. It's absolutely free to use for those particular students. It's really cool. So if you've got a brother, sister, or friend who needs that, that is our way of helping those kids. The way of helping the year 11, year 12s is this thing that I'm trying to do. That's your way of helping them. Make sure you get your brothers and sisters on it. Mr. Arnold's posted it there, www.numerize.com. Get your parents to sign up for it and get those youngers to sign up for it. It will help make that transition from year 6 to year 7. You guys remember what it's like. When you're going to big school, it's stressful. Imagine how those year 6s feel now when the world's in a crazy place and they're worried about secondary schools, probably even more worrying. So there's our little bit to help them out. Make sure you share it with them. Lovely to chat to you. Thanks so much, guys, for coming today. What we'll do tomorrow is solving equations involving exponents. So we're going to do a different topic tomorrow. So catch you later, everyone. Love that you guys came today. Enjoy yourselves. We went on for 38, went a bit longer, but keep up the hard work. Go back over the playlist. You can do it. I'm proud of you. And see you tomorrow. Checking out.